begin though in the Middle East and the latest scenes of violence at Jerusalem's most important holy site for both Muslims and Jews. Israeli forces arrested hundreds of Palestinians after storming the Al-Aqsa mosque in the early hours of the morning. Israeli forces fired tear gas and stun grenades, with video emerging of Palestinian worshippers being assaulted with batons. Israel says it was trying to remove youths who had barricaded themselves inside overnight, armed with stones, sticks and fireworks. Shortly after the raid, rockets were fired into southern Israel from Gaza before Israel carried out airstrikes on the besieged Palestinian enclave. The violence during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan and on the eve of the Jewish Passover holiday comes after a year of spiraling bloodshed in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Arise chief correspondent John Cookson reports.
The violence comes as Muslims mark the holy month of Ramadan and Jews prepare to begin the Passover festival this evening, raising fears of a wider conflagration. Confrontations at Al-Aqsa, the third holiest shrine in Islam and the most sacred site in Judaism, called the Temple Mount, have sparked deadly cross-border wars in the past. Similar clashes to these 2 years ago erupted into an 11-day conflict between Israel and the ruling Hamas militant group in Gaza. These images from Palestinian sources appear to show Israeli police using excessive force by any standards. Soon after the raid on the Al-Aqsa mosque, Hamas militants who control the Gaza Strip fired rockets into Israel. Israel's Iron Dome defense system appeared to take the missiles out before they could land. Hours later, Israel further responded with airstrikes on Hamas weapons storage and bomb-making sites. Israel's right-wing government has been condemned by Jordan and Egypt, and Saudi Arabia said the storming of the Al-Aqsa undermined peace efforts in the region. John Cookson, Arise News.
Well, for more on this, let's speak to Arise's Middle East analyst, Dr. Saul Zadka, who is monitoring developments from London. Good to see you, Dr. Zadka. What details have emerged about what happened at that Al-Aqsa mosque? I mean, there's a lot of talk about excessive force being used there.
Yes, not only that the Israelis were using excessive force, they detained more than 300 Palestinian youths that barricaded themselves inside the Al-Aqsa mosque. In many ways, the Israelis have played into the hands of Hamas and the Islamic Jihad and also prompted them to react by launching missiles from Gaza. But the Israelis say they acted simply because the Palestinians inside the mosque armed themselves with sticks, fireworks, and stones that they intended to use today against Jewish worshippers who were supposed to visit the Temple Mount in the event of Passover that starts tonight. So we have this ritual before. The Israelis are storming the mosque, arresting people. Hamas reacted, and the flashpoint is triggered well beyond Temple Mount, simply because so many Arab countries are involved. However, the Palestinians are saying that everything has been triggered because a group of radical Israelis had the intention of sacrificing an animal inside the compound in order to reconstruct sacrificing animals during the biblical time when the Jewish temple existed. So it was really triggered by this particular incident. This intention was never serious, but it was serious enough to create another flashpoint in this part of the conflict.
Well, absolutely, and we'll talk about that flashpoint in a moment. But in terms of the reaction to this, we understand the Arab League is calling an emergency meeting after the storming of that Al-Aqsa mosque. What are the implications of that?
Well, it is the initiative of Jordan. Jordan has a stake in Temple Mount. They are also responsible as some of the custodians of what the Arabs call Haram al-Sharif, the holy sanctuary, as well as Saudi Arabia, as well as Morocco. And they are asking Egypt to convene an emergency summit of the Arab League in order to discuss what is going to happen in the region, simply because it's not only what was happening in the compound, but also because the area was already in a very tense situation because of the Israeli right-wing government, and also because previous clashes between Israelis and Palestinians in the West Bank created a great deal of tension. We also have to mention that behind the scene, there is Iran. Iran directly financed the Islamic Jihad organization that launched the missiles from Gaza this morning.
And Dr. Zadka, we're hearing also that shortly after that raid, rockets were fired into southern Israel from Gaza before Israel carried out air strikes on Gaza. Can you elaborate more on that briefly?
Yeah, there were two salvos of rockets from Gaza, and I have to emphasize that those who were responsible for those rockets are not the Hamas people, but the Islamic Jihad. But Israel held Hamas as responsible for everything that is happening in Gaza, simply because Hamas holds the power in this enclave. So what happened was that after the Israelis stormed the mosque, they reacted, and then this morning they reacted again. All in all, 12 missiles were launched from Gaza inside Israel. And this, of course, is part of the ritual that the region is going through almost on a daily or a weekly basis. It's just that it came to an explosion because Ramadan and the Passover crossed each other on this explosive calendar in the region.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to come to it and ask you, Dr. Zadka, whether this has the potential of spiraling into a bigger, wider conflict. As you said, we're at the beginning of a week where the Jewish holiday of Passover coincides with the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. So there is the risk, is there not, that any incidents could lead to a conflagration happening around that holy site, particularly in East Jerusalem?
Oddly enough, not necessarily, because if you ask me what's the situation now at the moment as we speak, I will tell you a calm has been restored, as if nothing happened last night and this morning. And this is also quite strange, because you may think that the area would be definitely in a state of conflict and armed confrontation between everybody on all sides of the divide. Not necessarily, because somehow the tension has been diffused by a combination of the Israeli strong military measures against the Palestinians, by some understanding that were reached between both sides, and also by the efforts of Egypt, that has good relations with the Israeli government, with the Islamic Jihad, and with Hamas in Gaza. They are doing the utmost in order to restore calm. And it could be that the convention of the Arab League would also help to calm down the situation around the Temple Mount.
And in Israel itself, Dr. Zadka, all calm after those protests?
Yes, when you speak to people in the country, or when you look at the recent news, they are not dealing with this particular issue anymore on the headlines, as if nothing had happened. There is also a tendency to live in denial, because tension is quite widespread. The likelihood of the resumption of a military confrontation is around the corner all the time. Soldiers were not allowed to join their family over the Passover. They were asked to stay where they are in a state of being ready for a possible further escalation of the situation. But as we speak now, the situation is now calm.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Dr. Zadka. Dr. Saul Zadka is Arise's Middle East analyst, and he was talking to me there from London.